When you sit down to eat, have you ever really thought about where that food on your plate came from? I mean, really come from? Today we're going to pull back the curtain on agriculture. It's this massive, global system that takes a tiny little seed and turns it into your dinner. And let me tell you, the journey is way more complex and fascinating than you might think. So let's dive in.
Okay, so to get our heads around this huge, kind of overwhelming system, let's start small, really small. We're going to follow the journey of just one single grain of wheat and see how on earth it ends up as a loaf of bread.
Right, so it all starts out in a field with a farmer. This is where the magic begins. He's the one planting the wheat, fertilizing the soil, taking care of the crop while it grows. And he knows that this harvest, well, it's going to go to a market and then to a factory to get milled into flour for all sorts of stuff like bread and biscuits. But honestly, that's just the very, very beginning of the story.
So really, have you ever just stopped and thought about all the steps that happen in between? I mean, getting that simple grain from a field all the way to your table, it involves this huge, intricate chain of events. And that transformation, from a plant in the ground to a finished product on the shelf, it's not magic, right? It's powered by a gigantic economic system. So let's break down the basic structure of how we get our food.
It pretty much all happens in three main stages. First up, you've got what are called primary activities. That's the farmer, right? The person actually growing the wheat. Then you have the secondary activities. This is all about processing that raw material. So think of the factory milling the wheat or the bakery actually making the bread. And finally, there are the tertiary activities. These are all the services that support the whole thing. We're talking about the trucks that deliver the bread, the banks that give loans to the farm, even the ads on TV that make you want to buy it.
And agriculture, well, it's right there at the very start of this whole chain. It's a primary activity, which means it is the absolute foundation of our entire food system. Everything starts here. It's all about working with the earth, with nature, to grow the crops and raise the animals that give us the raw materials we all need to survive.
And just try to wrap your head around the human scale of this for a second. A staggering 50%, that is half of the entire world's population, is involved in agriculture in some way. It's just a truly massive global undertaking. It's huge.
But here's the thing. You can't just farm anywhere you want. This map here shows us something called arable land. It's a fancy term, but it basically just means land where you can actually grow crops. And as you can see, it's not everywhere. It's really concentrated in specific parts of the world where the conditions are, well, just right.
And this is the really crucial point. Arable land is a limited, precious resource. It's not just any old dirt. You need that perfect combination of good soil and the right climate for crops to actually grow and thrive. What this means is that our planet's ability to feed all of us is directly tied to how healthy and available these specific areas are.
Okay, so what's really interesting is that even inside these fertile regions, farming can look totally different depending on where you are in the world. Globally, you can boil it down to two fundamentally different approaches to how we grow our food.
At its heart, the difference really just comes down to one thing. What's the goal? On one side, you have what's called subsistence farming. The goal here is super simple. Grow enough food to feed your own family. That's it. Then on the other side, you have commercial farming, and this is all about growing crops and raising animals to sell them on the market for a profit.
So let's take a closer look at subsistence farming. The goal here is survival. It's not about making money. This usually means people are working the land with pretty simple traditional tools, and it's the family that provides all the labor. The output is small. Right, it's designed to be just enough to keep the family fed.
Commercial farming, on the other hand, is a completely different world. The goal here is profit. It's a business, plain and simple. We're talking about massive amounts of land, huge investments in all kinds of machinery, and a big workforce, all aimed at producing a huge surplus to sell on the market. This is farming on a truly industrial scale.
To really get this contrast, let's move away from the theory and look at something real. We're going to check out two different case studies, one farmer in India and one in the United States, and you'll see just how different their worlds really are.
And honestly, this one image kind of says it all, doesn't it? On one side, you see farming that relies on manual labor, on basic tools, and on the other, you've got this highly mechanized, tech-driven operation. The equipment alone tells a huge part of the story here.
All right, let's break down the actual numbers. Just look at the farm size. Moonalal in India is working with about 1.5 hectares. Joe Horn in the US, he's got 300 hectares. That is 200 times bigger. It's wild. Now, what about technology? Moonalal might rent a tractor if he can, maybe he uses bullocks. Joe, on the other hand, is using a computer that's linked to a satellite to manage his fields. Joe's running a business selling to huge market agencies. Munalal sells whatever extra he has at the local mundi or community market. The scale of their operations, it's just worlds apart.
So we've seen the two completely different ways the world farms. Now let's switch gears a bit and look at what we're actually growing, and why the future of all this is so incredibly important for every single one of us on this planet.
I mean, there's a huge variety of crops grown all over the world, and it's not just for food. A lot of it goes to supply other industries. Of course, you've got the big staples that feed billions of people, things like wheat, rice, maize. But then you also have fiber crops, like the cotton that's probably in the t-shirt you're wearing right now, and of course, beverage crops, like the tea or coffee that, let's be honest, a lot of us can't start our day without. And hey, speaking of coffee, here's a fun little story for you. The legend goes that coffee was discovered way back around 850 AD. The story is about an Ethiopian goat herder named Kaldi. He noticed his goats went absolutely bonkers, super energetic, after eating these berries from a certain bush. So he got curious, tried them himself, felt that same buzz, and just like that, the world's favorite morning ritual was born.
But fun stories aside, this all points to a really critical issue: agricultural development. At its heart, this is all about the ongoing effort to increase how much food we can produce so we can meet the demand of our constantly growing population. It's about finding ways to get more food from the land we already have, whether that's through better irrigation, more resilient seeds, or just smarter technology.
And really, the ultimate goal of all of this, every single farmer, every tractor, every new idea, is to achieve something called food security. And that is a fundamental idea. It means that all people, at all times, should have access to enough safe and nutritious food to live a healthy, active life. It's really about making sure hunger becomes a thing of the past, for everyone.
Which leaves us with a final and pretty heavy question. In a world with over 8 billion of us, this challenge is more urgent than ever before. What's it going to take to bridge that massive gap between the two worlds of farming we've just seen? How do we build a system that makes sure every single person on this planet has enough to eat? That's the real challenge.